Have you ever found yourself in a political debate where it feels like you and the other person are speaking completely different languages? You know, where words like secular or progressive seem to mean something totally different from what you'd find in a dictionary? Well, in his book, Perversion of India's Political Parlance, author Sita Ram Goel says that's not your imagination. He makes the case that India's entire political vocabulary has been systematically twisted, turning healthy debate into a battlefield of loaded labels. So where did this feeling come from? For the author, this wasn't just some academic theory. It came from a really powerful personal experience, an encounter that he says showed him a deep, almost uncrossable divide in Indian public life. It was one specific moment that made him realize the problem wasn't just a simple difference of opinion, but a total breakdown in the very language we use for politics. The story kicks off back in 1959. It involves the author and one of India's most respected national leaders, Jaya Prakash Narayan, or JP as he was known. And this wasn't some public speech or a rally, but a private conversation that, for the author, really exposed a deep wound in how people think and talk about politics in India. So here's how it went down. An RSS leader asks the author to invite JP to visit one of their camps. JP's reaction is immediate, and it's not good. He's almost angry, throwing out a whole string of labels: communal, reactionary, and revivalist. But after a bit of back and forth, he actually agrees to go. And when he gets to the camp, JP is clearly impressed. He sees these highly educated, disciplined young members. But here's the twist, the part that stuck with the author. On the way back, after seeing all of that with his own eyes, JP says he's still not satisfied, suspecting it's all just a front to revive the old Maratha Empire. You see the disconnect there? That was the crucial thing for the author. Here was JP, a man of incredible reason, seeing one thing, but interpreting it through a completely different filter. A filter built, Goel argues, by a specific political language. It was like this insurmountable wall of words was stopping him from connecting what he saw with what he believed. And that moment became the starting point for this whole investigation. And that experience leads us right to the heart of the book's argument, that key political words in India have been intentionally emptied of their real meanings and turned into weapons. They've become part of a language that doesn't help us understand each other, but actually gets in the way. So the author lays his claim out right here. He argues that one group has basically claimed all the good words for themselves, progressive, secular, democratic. At the same time, they've assigned all the bad ones, reactionary, revivalist, fascist, to anyone who disagrees with them. He says these labels aren't about describing reality anymore. They're just tools to praise your side and condemn the other. Okay, to really get what he's talking about, let's zoom in on one of the biggest words in this whole debate: secular. Now, the dictionary gives us a pretty clear definition, right? It's about keeping the state and religion separate. Simple enough. Let's hold that as our baseline. Now, compare that dictionary definition to what the author claims the word secular has become in Indian politics. He argues it's not a principle anymore, it's a checklist. To be secular, you have to do these specific things: support Islamic causes, blame the RSS for riots, and get upset if a government official performs a Hindu ritual. According to him, this has become the real political test for the label, and it's a million miles away from the dictionary. And the effect of all this? As the author puts it, you end up with a political scene where one side is always on the defense, not against actual arguments, but against the crushing weight of these loaded words. He says it's a strategy to win the debate by defining the terms before it even starts. Okay, so if this political language is so specific and, in the author's view, so artificial, where did it come from? Well, the next part of the book argues that its roots aren't in India at all. They're from somewhere else entirely. According to the book, if you look back before 1917, the big debate in India was between groups with Indian origins, like the moderates and the nationalists. But then the Bolshevik Revolution happened in Russia, and that changed everything. It created a brand new political vocabulary, words about class struggle, progressive, reactionaries, a whole language basically invented by Lenin. And the author claims this new language was imported into India in the 1920s and then really took off in the 1930s. Let's be really clear about what he's claiming here. His core argument is that this whole way of talking about politics is an alien implant. It didn't grow naturally out of India's own freedom struggle. He argues it was actively brought in from the Soviet Union by what he calls a fifth column, whose goal was to serve foreign interests. And the author really zooms in on Jawaharlal Nehru as a key player in all this. He argues that Nehru, with his Western education, was never really comfortable with the language of nationalism that came from India's own history. He found this new imported communist language to be a much better fit. And according to Goel, Nehru's influence helped it spread like wildfire among the intellectual class. So, after all that diagnosis of the problem, this foreign, twisted language, what's the author's solution? What's the cure? Well, he argues for a complete and total replacement, a return to what he calls a true language of the land. His solution is a pretty radical one. He says, forget this imported vocabulary. We need to throw it out and adopt a new language of Indian nationalism. And he argues that this new language has to be deeply rooted in Sanatana Dharma. For him, you can't have a genuine national conversation without using what he sees as a genuinely national language. So what would that actually look like? Well, according to the author, speaking this new language has 5 direct and pretty startling results. First, he claims India, or Bharatavarsha, is one, and the partition has to be reversed. Second, that what he calls closed creeds, like Islam and Christianity, don't belong in India. Third, the economy should be based on local self-reliance, or Swadeshi. Fourth, a total rejection of both communism and consumerism. And finally, in his view, you'd need a strong central government to protect this national heritage. And this quote really sums up his entire argument, doesn't it? For him, the political battle is, first and foremost, a battle over words. He concludes that the only way for Indian nationalism to win against what he calls these languages of imperialism is to reclaim and speak a language that comes directly from Sanatana Dharma. And all of this leaves us with a really big question to think about. Putting aside any one ideology, what happens to a country, to its ability to solve problems, when the very tools we use to talk to each other, our words, become the main thing we fight about? When we can't even agree on what our words mean, how can we ever hope to agree on anything else?